The origin of life. Key concept, the origin of life on Earth remains a puzzle. Earth was very different billions of years ago. There have been many hypotheses of Earth's origins. The most widely accepted hypothesis of Earth's origins is called the nebula hypothesis. Several sets of hypotheses propose how life began on Earth. There are two organic molecule hypotheses. The Miller-Urey experiment, which was famous for replicating what the early ocean and atmosphere must have been like, and trying to prove how they could synthesize organic molecules from that environment. The other is the meteorite hypothesis. There are several different hypotheses of early cell structure. The iron sulfide bubbles hypotheses. We can still see that there are chemical bubbles bubbling up at the bottom of the ocean. The lipid membrane hypotheses. A hypothesis proposes that RNA was the first genetic material. Ribozymes are RNA molecules that catalyze their own replication. DNA needs enzymes to replicate itself. So it seems that RNA should have came before the DNA itself. 12.4 Early single-celled organisms. Key concept: single-celled organisms existed 3.8 billion years ago. Microbes have changed the physical and chemical composition of Earth. The oldest known fossils are a group of marine cyanobacteria. Prokaryotic cells, they were adding oxygen to the atmosphere and they deposited minerals. And they looked much like the algae that we have today. Those cyanobacteria are responsible for photosynthesis and creating the oxygen in the atmosphere that we now have. Fossil stromatolites provide evidence of early colonies of life. Eukaryotic cells may have evolved through a process called endosymbiosis. Endosymbiosis is a relationship in which one organism lives within the body of another. Mitochondria and chloroplast may have developed through endosymbiosis. The thought is that there were mitochondria free-floating, and eventually a bacterium entered through a cell wall and eventually over many generations evolved in a symbiotic relationship, became more like the eukaryotic cells that we know of today. The photosynthesis, the same thing. The chloroplast floating around on their own were engulfed by another cell and they evolved. The evolution of sexual reproduction has led to increased diversity. Genetic variation is an advantage of sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction may have led to the evolution of multicellular life. 12.5 Radiation of multicellular life. Multicellular life evolved in distinct phases. Life moved on to land during the Paleozoic era. Multicellular organisms first appeared during the Paleozoic era. The era began 544 million years ago and ended 248 million years ago. The Cambrian explosion led to a huge diversity of animal species. There's the trilobite. Remember we said that was an index fossil. It was found in many, many places, but for a very short amount of time. Life moved on to land in the middle of the Paleozoic era. Reptiles radiated during the Mesozoic era. The Mesozoic era is also known as the Age of Reptiles. It began 248 million years ago and ended 65 million years ago. The environment on Earth at that time was very habitable for reptiles, but not much else. There were a few mammals at this time, but the environment didn't suit their needs. The dinosaurs, however, those reptiles, they were thriving. Dinosaurs, birds, flowering plants, and first mammals appeared during this time period. Mammals began to radiate during the Cenozoic era. The Cenozoic era began 65 million years ago and continues today. Placental mammals, much like human beings, and monotremes evolved and diversified. Anatomically, modern humans appeared late in this era. 12.6 Primate evolution. Key concept: humans appeared late in Earth's history. Humans share a common ancestor with other primates. Remember, we talked about common ancestors, much like you and your cousins share a grandparent. Doesn't mean that you came from them or they came from you. Primates are mammals with flexible hands and feet, forward-looking eyes, and enlarged brains. Primates evolved into prosimians and anthropoids. Prosimians are the oldest living primates. They're mostly small and nocturnal. They're very cute and cuddly. Anthropoids are human-like primates. They are subdivided into the New World monkeys, Old World monkeys, and hominoids. Hominids are divided into hominids, great apes, and lesser apes. Hominids include living and extinct humans. Bipedal means walking on two legs. It was an advantage for organisms that were foraging. It helped carrying infants and food, using tools. It freed up our hands. We didn't have to rely on our hands to walk. We could, as bipedals, walk on our feet and carry things, use things in our hands. There are many fossils of extinct hominoids. Most hominoids are either the genus Australopithecus or Homo. Australopithecines were a successful genus. The Homo genus first evolved 2.4 million years ago. Modern humans arose about 200,000 years ago. You can see by the skull shapes how they have changed. They're still very similar, but they have changed. Homo sapien fossils date to 200,000 years ago. Human evolution is influenced by a tool-based culture. There is a trend toward increased brain size in hominids. Here's a picture that shows you the Australopithecus hominoid evolving into Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, and Homo sapiens sapiens. We, of course, are Homo sapiens, so we are down here on this corner. But you can see how these features have changed slightly throughout time. Comparing apes to hominids, hominoids evolved from anthropoids into apes and hominids. Hominids, remember, are humans and their direct ancestors. You can see in the picture on the top right here, the Australopithecine and the chimpanzee, the very similar structures they have. Chimpanzees are the closest living human relative. Remember, that's not saying we came from monkeys. We evolved at the same time as monkeys. Chimpanzees and humans share 98.4% of their nuclear DNA. Gorillas and humans share about 97.7% of their DNA. Most human beings, there's only a very small fraction of 1% that differentiates each of us from one another. Even though we're all humans, our DNA differs a little bit. The common ancestor of apes and hominids is thought to have been an arboreal climber, so something that climbed through the trees. Hominids became bipedal, and the apes evolved knuckle walking. Anatomical differences between the two are related to bipedal locomotion. Considerable controversy exists about the identity of the first hominoid. Much attention is focused on an early Miocene ape, Proconsul. Has many of the characteristics of the Old World monkeys, but it lacks a tail and has ape-like hands, feet, and pelvis.